Hi, this is Dr. Jackie Robinson providing a PowerPoint presentation on metacognition, knowing how you learn. I agree with Dr. Sandra McGuire, who was at the Center for Academic Success at the University of West Florida, and she said this: faculty must help students learn how to learn. And I think that's so important, and that's why I like to provide this presentation to students who take my classes. It's important that I help students learn and figure out how best to learn the content that I'm trying to teach. So in psychology, the content that you may learn and the way that you may go about learning that may be different um, from how you would use your learning skills and apply them to learning math. So let's begin to learn how you learn, and you can apply this probably to any discipline, but specifically, I want you to think about psychology. First of all, what is metacognition? Take a moment and Google metacognition on your phone. Read the description. And I think what you'll come up with is metacognition is self-knowledge, knowing how you know and how you came to know the things that you know. Because helping yourself to become an efficient learner, in other words, a learner who can spend actually less time on material and learn more, is what you've been trying to develop your entire life. Since the beginning of your life, you've been working on becoming an efficient learner. You've developed these skills since pre-K or even before. So, you have become an expert learner. But let's think about thinking and knowing a little bit so that you can use that knowledge, that expert knowledge you have about yourself as a learner to apply this to college work. Why is it that some students start off struggling in college? And these are students who did well in high school. So why would they struggle in college? Well, research shows that two-thirds of 12th graders report spending less than 6 hours per week doing homework, and yet they maintain A and B averages in high school. So, this kind of sets students up for an expectation that they can spend very little time, they can invest very little in terms of time, and still make those same A's and B's. Most students, however, overestimate their ability to handle the college level material, especially when they're trying to balance that with an active social life, perhaps a work schedule, and do many of the other things that they become involved in college. And so instead of adjusting upward the amount of time that they need to spend and invest in studying and working on their classwork, they tend to lower their expectations, keep the same amount of time investment as they did in high school, and consequently, they end up making C's instead of A's and B's. They kind of lower their expectations for themselves because they decide, I can't do it all. Another contributor to lesser performance in college than in high school is limited time management. Students have to figure out, how am I going to squeeze in work, school, social activities? And they end up, as I said before, justifying their lower performance. Well, I have to work or I'll be evicted. And they tell themselves these kinds of things and they end up settling for lower grades. But honestly, this is not a time issue. It's a time management issue. So becoming a more efficient learner, learning more by studying perhaps less, you sharpen those metacognitive skills to become an efficient learner, and you can make those A's and B's. Metacognition is so important because it helps you manage your time better. It helps you maintain higher academic expectations instead of settling for lower grades. it's going to end up reducing your stress associated with school. And research shows that students, especially around exam time, will have higher stress and they'll even have weaker immune systems during this time because of the stress. So it keeps you from being so overwhelmed when tests are coming along. And ultimately, maintaining those higher expectations and higher grades is going to result in your being able to present a portfolio that reflects that you're a very good student with good work habits. That's going to translate into higher income one day. So, we're going to talk about some of the metacognitive learning strategies that are known to work. I want you to figure out how you learn best. Is it by talking about information, seeing the information in a visual display, writing information down, or perhaps it's doing all of these? There's a very good site at LSU. It's a learning preference self test. It's a personality and sensory preference test. So you can register at www.lsu.edu/learn and create an account, and you can take the personality and sensory preference tests that tell you a little bit more about your personality as a learner and your sensory preferences. Do I like hearing information? Do I like seeing information? What are my preferences? Put this together with what you already know about yourself as a learner, and this will improve your metacognition. So, let's talk about learning styles. We do use all modalities to learn, but all of us tend to have a preference for one or two over the others. As a visual learners tend to remember what is written. They'll often see the answer in their mind's eye when they're taking exams. They'll visualize pictures, graphs, see words on a piece of paper. So it's important that strong visual learners turn their notes into pictures when possible. Use flashcards when possible, things that are written down. The verbal auditory learner will learn better by talking and by hearing someone else talk about the information. And so this learner should talk about the information that they're trying to learn. They should read aloud when they're studying. They should give a mini lecture when talking to friends about something. Um, for example, they may be talking to a friend and say, "Let me tell you what I learned about dreams the other day in my psychology course." And then begin to give sort of a mini lecture telling that other person what you have learned. They will also learn better by listening to lectures, and perhaps if the lectures are recorded, listening to those lectures over and over again. The kinesthetic learner is more of a motor learner. They like hands-on learning. They like doing. It's important that the kinesthetic learner take notes. What will often happen today is that if a student has a PowerPoint slide of lecture material, many students won't write anything down. But for the kinesthetic learner, it's extremely important that they also take notes, not just look at the PowerPoint slides, but that they jot down notes or they reword some of the main points in their own words and write it down. Kinesthetics will enjoy studying and moving at the same time. So to combine auditory and kinesthetic, if there's a recorded lecture and you're listening to it on your cell phone, you could do that and take a walk at the same time. The global learner doesn't like learning isolated facts. Facts on a sheet are very hard to get involved and engaged in. So, in order to grasp the new concepts, a global learner must see the big picture. That helps them put the pieces together and understand how the specific information relates to each other and to a larger concept. This type of learner should skim the summary or the overview, getting a bird's eye view of the information in order to help details to stick. So, the global learner, prior to going to class, especially a class in which there will be lecturing or anything that's covering the material, should review the summary or the overview for that chapter so that they have a bird's eye view or a general idea of what is going to be discussed. Then, when the teacher talks about specific concepts and details, that information will begin to stick even before you sit down and quote unquote study it. It will begin to stick because you have a general idea of where information fits and how it relates to each other. The sequential learner will need order, and if the instructor does not provide information in a very orderly fashion, the sequential learner is going to naturally organize the material and put it in a structure that works for them. They memorize more easily when information is placed in a logical sequence, step one, step two, step three. And when they problem solve, they also tend to use step one, step two, step three. So if this kind of learner uh, is in a class where the professor tends to move from subject to subject. Some would call it ramble. I'm sure the instructor wouldn't call it that. But if you're in a class like that, this learner may need to work with the material themselves to provide order and structure in order to understand and then more easily digest the information and claim it, learn it, own it. So here are some study strategies now that we have talked about the learning styles. The first study strategy is to use the why, how, what. Study with the questions why. Why did this author say this? How did he discover it? What did this author have in mind? Look for the answers and write them down. So if the title is Levels of Consciousness, the title in a book chapter, Levels of Consciousness, ask yourself, what are the levels of consciousness? How will I be able to tell the difference between the levels of consciousness? Turn the title into questions that you can answer. This example I give here is that if the title is Moral Treatment in the 18th Century, look for the answers. What is moral treatment? What was it like in the 18th century? Why did it succeed? Why did it fail? How was it carried out? If you answer those questions, then you're probably answering some of the very questions that will eventually be on the exam. Test your understanding of topics by giving a mini lecture on the concept as we talked about before. Call mom, dad, a friend, talk about the new information you've learned. And this particularly works well for verbal and auditory learners because they like to talk, and hearing others talk about the information, that's the auditory part, helps them own the information. Another strategy is to preview the chapter before the lecture or class meeting that covers that material. Go to class and listen actively. What that means is take notes and participate. Active engagement improves learning. Again, we're trying to be efficient so that you don't spend hours trying to cram at the end just before an exam. You are doing little things all along the way that will reduce the cram time and will allow you to use the time that you're face to face with the instructor or in class to learn, to actually own and learn the material. Review your class notes and slides as soon as possible after the class experience. or lecture occurs. One study showed that students who spent 10 extra minutes, just 10 minutes, after class, reviewing the lecture notes and the things that they studied, scored 20 to 30 points higher on a quiz covering that material than those who did not spend the 10 extra minutes. So basically, what I'm saying is Class A every student in that class spends 10 extra minutes after the lecture, after the class, reviewing what was just discussed in class. Class B does not do that. And what the study showed is that Class A, the average number of points was 20 to 30 points higher on the exam or quiz covering that material compared to Class B, the folks who did not study for 10 minutes immediately after class. Again, this is efficient learning. This is before the information gets cold, massaging it a little bit. By reviewing it, studying it, it allows you to jot down little notes that you might need to make to clarify what the teacher intended for that slide. Here's another strategy. Use the intent study session approach. The intent study session approach goes like this. You're going to, the first 2 to 5 minutes, set goals for your study session. What do you plan to accomplish? And for the next, 20 minutes to an hour, study with focus and action. You're going to create examples for yourself, make flashcards, create outlines, work problems, put things in the sequential step-by-step structural order that you need if you're a structured kind of learner like that. If you're doing math, you're going to follow an example and then you're going to do some work without a math example. Quiz yourself, create questions for yourself. Then you're going to take a 5-minute break. You've done that for 20 minutes to an hour, done the strategies, take a 5-minute break, and then 5 minutes review what you just studied. And then you can repeat that cycle. So this is a more focused approach to studying. Practice testing. This is the most important strategy I think that I will provide for you. Have you ever sat down and reviewed your notes and felt like you hadn't learned a thing? You just spent 20 minutes reviewing notes and you feel like, I didn't learn anything. Well, you need more active engagement than just reviewing notes. And practice testing, and this is self-testing, works. Research shows that this really works. This is how I encourage students to do it. If you're taking notes in a binder, take the back sheet of that binder. First of all, you have to make sure you write only on one side of the paper. So on the back sheet that is clean, you're going to read a note and then you're going to create a question based on that note on the back side. And use a different color of ink or pen. So let's say you wrote in blue ink, then you're going to use black or red to create your question. And then you're going to flip back over where the answer is in your note, and you're going to put A1. So your question is Q1. And in your notes, you'll have A1 written in a different color. If your notes are in blue ink, you're going to write your A1 in red ink. And so you're going to go through your notes and create those questions based on your notes. And then the next time you sit down, you will not just read your notes. You will start with the questions. So Q1, you'll ask yourself that question. You'll try to answer it. If you can't answer it, you just flip over and look at A1, which is where the answer is. So you've given yourself feedback immediately. You go on to question 2. You do the same thing. Now, once you start answering the questions well, you know you don't have to go back over those questions again. So you can put a little check next to that until just before the exam. And that's when you want to review all of the questions again. This is an active engagement way of testing yourself rather than just reviewing notes. Again, very efficient way of learning, and I strongly encourage this approach. These are just additional notes on how to do practice testing. What about after an exam? Can you use metacognition after you've taken an exam? You certainly can. Let's say you're kind of disappointed in how you performed. You received an 80 and you expected an a 90 or better. You can use metacognition after the exam. Meet with your teacher and compare your answers to the key. Review your exam answers, checking for how the questions were constructed, because there's a good chance that how the way the questions were constructed for this exam will be similar to how they will be constructed in future exams. You want to look for what the professor was looking for by asking the question. Look for the patterns in how the professor teaches and tests. Take a look at how you approach the question and how you might approach them differently in the future. Discuss with your professor why that particular answer is the correct answer and why you think you gave an answer that was not correct. So you're looking for patterns and you're giving yourself feedback on how to study for this specific course and instructor and the types of exams the instructor gives. This kind of metacognitive approach will actually help you in just performing better on the exam the next time. Look for patterns and weaknesses in terms of what you knew and what you didn't know. What I like to do is do a metacognitive analysis with a student and help them jot down strategies that they can use in the future. Here are more strategies. Take good notes. Either write them on a separate sheet or use a copy of your PowerPoint slides to note the important information. And this is very important for students who learn by writing things. As a professor, I like to review students' notes to see what kind of notes they're taking. I will give you feedback on how to take better notes and how to capture the essence of a lecture. If you're not a good note taker, you may tape record lectures or get a note taker buddy. Notice who in your class seems to take good notes and ask them if you can be their note buddy. Now, don't entirely rely on the buddy to take notes for you, okay? But check your notes against your buddies to fill in what you may have missed. Some research has shown that a student's performance can partially be predicted by the quality of their note taking. Okay, so note taking is very important, and if you believe that you're not a very good note taker, there's something you can do about that. You don't have to settle for the lower grades. Meet with your professor early if you're struggling in a class. Here's a personal story. Uh, a young lady in my introduction to psychology class several years ago made 52 out of 100 on exam one. She came to me and she was very concerned. And I did the usual metacognitive analysis that I do with most students who meet with me. I did things like examining her notes and giving her feedback on improving her note taking. I asked about studying and her study strategies. I helped her develop additional strategies, and we didn't just talk. I had her to write these strategies down, and she took these strategies with her. On exam two, she made a 90. And she continued to make A's on exams and ended up with an A in the class. So metacognition really works. So it's important to also do your own metacognitive analysis. I'd like for you to consider the resources provided for this course and your own learning style preference. After reviewing this PowerPoint, I want you to think about this. How do you plan to approach this course? And what strategies will you use? Think about the learning preferences needed to learn the information for this course. How will you use your learning preference to learn this material? What are your preferred ways of studying? Is it talking about information, seeing it in a visual display, writing the information down? Are you more of a structural learner, needing step by step? And so, did you organize your information in a sequence like that? I would encourage you to spend time immediately after a lecture or a class meeting. Can you spend 30 minutes immediately after class studying and doing something associated with the course? Ask yourself that. What are you doing immediately after you get out of class? Give yourself 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, because you will be learning information in those few minutes that will keep you from having to cram to try and get that information in prior to an exam. So you don't have to spend hours after hours after hours. You will have learned the information in class and immediately after class. Ask yourself, how can you structure things so that you can follow the course syllabus time frame for tasks? In other words, if quizzes are opening and closing at certain times, what can you do about that to structure your time so that you don't miss those deadlines? What about putting events in your phone? If there's a concept that's particularly difficult to understand, what about taking a picture of it so that it's on your phone? And when you're just sitting doing nothing, maybe you're sitting in a doctor's office or waiting for someone, you can just go to that picture that you took and review in preparation for the exam. These are some of the things. Just think about learning and how you learn and how best to learn for the course or courses you're taking. Finally, metacognitive skills work. I've seen it work over and over again. And so, continue to think about learning and how you learn best, developing more efficient, learning smarter, not harder, studying smarter, not harder, learning more efficient metacognitive skills. Thank you for listening to this presentation on metacognition.